I am stunned at what you have said this week about your claiming to have wanted to reopen schools. I think you'll find that most parents believe you were the tip of the spear of school closures. There are numerous statements you made over the summer of 20 scaring people to death about the possibility of opening schools. And I hear no remorse whatsoever about the generational damage that's been done to these kids. I have 2 kids with learning differences. Do you know how hard it is for them to learn at home and not in a classroom that was designed for them? And for you to sit in front of Congress and the American people and say, oh, I wanted to open them the whole time. I am shocked. I'm stunned.
Joining me now, DeAngelis, Connor Boyack, co-authors of the book, 40 Ways Government Schools Are Failing Today's Students. The book is titled Mediocrity. Golly, that is appropriate for where our schools are. Hey, Corey, so Randi Weingarten's been doing a very public I didn't want to close down schools campaign, which is laughable. Everyone here has a brain, saw her want to close down schools. So what's with the public relations campaign?
I mean, look, it's a total gaslighting campaign and nobody's falling for it. She doesn't want people to know that she's responsible for hurting kids academically, mentally, and physically. I mean, her union lobbied the CDC to make it more difficult to reopen schools. Her union also just nonstop fear-mongering the entire time. You had her local affiliates tweeting out that it was racist, sexist, and misogynist to reopen schools. Her union also threatened safety strikes in 2020. And also when Trump had a plan to reopen schools, she called it reckless, callous, and cruel. And so this is just a total revisionist history going on right now. But Twitter isn't falling for it, I'll say that. If you look at the community notes on her pinned tweets for the past 3 days, they've fact-checked her and said, oh, no, actually, she wasn't fighting to reopen schools. And you know what? If she was fighting to reopen schools, why did it take so long? Why were the private schools open from the get-go? Why were the private businesses able to do it? At the very least, they were extremely incompetent. But the reality is they held children's education hostage, and we all know it.
Connor, she said a line the other day that I cannot get out of my head about, well, it was her and the CDC. Here's a video of it.
I do not talk to representatives of the government.
Do you have a direct number to Director Walensky?
Do I have Director Walensky's direct number?
Yes.
Yes, I have Director Walensky's direct number.
Connor, why exactly would the head of the CDC need a direct number with the head of the teachers union?
There's no reason that I can think of, and how we would all like to have that direct number to have lobbied the CDC directly on positions that we felt were appropriate. It shows that the teachers' unions are really about political power, the concentration of political power. Sometimes in quiet circles, they'll admit as much. Sometimes they'll let a tweet fly before they delete it that hints at the fact that they use children ultimately as political props. But this is really, the schools have really become a jobs program for adults. It's become a way to make sure to fight for their turf, their money, their future, and the kids are used as the excuse. All the while, the teachers' unions and the administrative class in the schools are presiding over a steady and substantial decline into intellectual mediocrity. So that's why Corey and I wanted to write the book, is almost as a warning cry to fellow parents to say, don't pay attention to the Weingartens out there. They're trying to gaslight you. They're lying about things. Let's look at the data. Let's look at the true facts about what's happening in these schools and the absolute mediocrity that's coming out of them.
Corey, how are governments failing our students? How are these schools failing our students?
Well, they're a one-size-fits-all monopoly that has no incentive to cater to the needs of families. And so instead of focusing on the basics, focusing on education, we have schools now focusing on indoctrination with gender ideology in the classroom, critical race theory, and families are pissed. I mean, this is one of the unintended benefits of Randi Weingarten pushing to close the schools, is that families got to see what the heck was going on in the classroom, and parents are now pushing for alternatives like school choice. They're homeschooling their kids because they don't want to send their children to institutions where they feel like they're being indoctrinated for 13 years without exit options. So you know what? Randi Weingarten's a horrible person in so many ways, but we should really give her the unintentional school choice champion award of the past 3 years because she keeps stepping in it over and over again. She can't help herself. She's so drunk on power, and she has been for so long, she can't reverse course. And ultimately, that's going to be good news for children and families, that the ultimate accountability for Randi Weingarten is not testifying in front of Congress and putting her in the public light. It's through allowing families to escape her government schools that she controls and staffs, and letting families take their money to alternatives like private, charter, and homeschool options.
Connor, COVID obviously brought all this stuff into people's homes. They woke up when they watched what little Aiden, Jaden, and Braden were learning on Zoom, but it didn't begin there. It was already there a long time before COVID, wasn't it?
It absolutely was, and that's the travesty of what's happening right now, is that many parents have settled back into their routines that they were in pre-COVID. They thought, okay, that was a blip on the radar. It was this unfortunate thing, but now my kids are back to school and things were fine, and I went to school and I turned out fine, so my kids will turn out fine too. But things pre-COVID were not fine. The intellectual mediocrity we're talking about, the American people were warned 40 years ago. Corey and I published our book on the 40th anniversary of when Ronald Reagan's administration published an open letter to the American people. It was called A Nation at Risk, where they warned that the educational foundations of America were being threatened by a rising tide of mediocrity, and that if a foreign government had attempted to impose upon America that very mediocrity, we might have viewed it as an act of war, they said. As it stands, we've allowed this to happen to ourselves. That was in 1983. And when I share this story and I'm out public speaking, I ask the audience, raise your hand if you think that things have substantially improved in the schools since 1983. To date, in all the times that I've asked that question, no one has dared to raise their hand, because I think we all know that things are even worse than they were back in the early 80s, and so we got to do something about it.
Corey, give me some good news before we get out of here. What's new in the school choice front? Are we getting wins? Are we getting W's out there?
Yes, in the past 2 years alone, 6 states have gone all in, allowing all families to access their kids' money to go to a private, charter, or home-based educational option. So that's huge momentum. And I'm going to North Carolina today. They're on the cusp. Right before we got on this interview, they passed through their House Education Committee a bill that would expand their school choice program to all families. And they have all Republicans signed on as co-sponsors to that bill in both chambers, the House and the Senate, which gives them just enough votes to override an expected veto from their hypocrite governor, Roy Cooper, who sent his own daughter to private school, yet rails against allowing less advantaged families to have school choice.